Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the BeQuran Podcast. I'm Ali.
And I'm Fatima. In this episode, we're taking a deep dive into one of the most profound and sacred texts in human history, the Holy Qur'an.
That's right, it's a book that's shaped civilizations, inspired hearts, and guided the lives of over 1 billion people. But how much do we really understand about its structure, its message, and what makes it so unique?
We'll be exploring those questions and more, looking into how the Quran is arranged, what its main themes are, and how it connects with earlier scriptures like the Torah and the Bible.
Plus, we'll discuss what the Quran says about daily life, ethics, and the kind of engagement it calls for. Not just memorization, but deep reflection.
So join us as we peel back the layers of the Quran and uncover what makes this book not just divine in origin, but transformative in essence. Let's begin. Bismillah.
What if a single book held the keys to understanding, maybe 1/4 of the world's population? Yet, for many of us, it remains a bit of a mystery.
That's a great question to start with.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into the Quran. Our mission really is to try and unpack its essence, its unique structure, and its huge significance.
And we're drawing on some really interesting insights here, primarily from Dr. Sayyid Ammar Nakshawani's discussion.
Exactly, because, for almost every Muslim across the globe, the Quran isn't just some book. It's the sacred scripture, usually right there in the household.
It's considered the holiest book in Islam, revered as the literal divine word.
Okay, so starting there, where does it fit in with other scriptures? Does Islam see it as totally separate? That's actually a foundational point.
Islam doesn't really present itself as starting from scratch, spiritually speaking. It explicitly acknowledges and kind of builds upon a tradition of divine revelation. Muslims believe in holy books that came before the Prophet Muhammad.
Like which ones?
Specifically, recognizing the Torah and the Bible as prior scriptures. Now, there are discussions about preservation and the exact content of all these books, including the Quran itself, though within the faith, the Quran is seen as the final and, the most perfectly preserved revelation.
Okay, that acknowledgement of earlier traditions feels important.
As a continuation, maybe.
Not a complete break.
Precisely. It sets the stage.
So if we think about the Quran itself, like the physical book, what are we talking about?
How is it put together? Okay, so physically, the Quran is made up of 114 distinct chapters.
They're called surahs.
114 surahs and over 6,000 individual verses or ayats.
Over 6,000 verses, that's a lot of text. But here's where I think it gets tricky for some people, maybe challenges of preconception.
Go on.
Is it structured like, say, a history book? Chronologically, like parts of the Old or New Testament might feel?
Right. And that's a really crucial distinction to make. According to Muslims, the Quran is seen as this profound miracle from God, a direct divine communication. However, it's absolutely vital to understand it is not a book narrating history chronologically from A to B.
Not like Genesis to Revelation, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Unlike maybe a sequential story of prophets' lives you might find elsewhere, the Quran doesn't give you a narrative from the beginning of creation right through to the end. It's just not designed that way.
Not a history textbook. That feels like a fundamental difference. So not a linear historical account, and you mentioned something even more surprising.
Earlier, the order of the chapters. This often catches people off guard. The order of the 114 chapters in the Quran we have today is completely different from the sequence in which the verses and chapters were actually revealed to Prophet Muhammad.
Really? How different?
Well, take the very first verses revealed to the Prophet. In the compiled Quran, they're placed as chapter 96.
96? Wow.
So way down the line.
Why? Is there a reason for that? That's a subject of ongoing scholarly discussion, actually. Some theories suggested divinely inspired thematic arrangement. Others focus more on the practicalities, how it was compiled and collected.
Over the 23 years of revelation and afterwards. So the arrangement itself encourages a different kind of reading.
I think so, yes. It almost forces a deeper, maybe more thematic engagement rather than just reading it straight through like a story. That's fascinating. So if it's not ordered by timeline or even by revelation, what is the central thread? What's the main message holding it all together?
Good question. If you look at the big picture, the absolute core message, the thing that runs through pretty much every chapter, every verse, it consistently leads towards understanding monotheism.
Belief in one God.
Exactly. Belief in one singular God, Allah. You find this constant discussion within the Quran about understanding God, his attributes, his justice, mercy, wisdom.
And it really strongly encourages believers to try and manifest those divine attributes in
In their own character in their daily lives.
So it's about understanding God and then reflecting that understanding outwards.
Now, you mentioned narratives earlier.
Yeah,
What kind of stories or figures do we actually find in the Quran?
right. Because I imagine, like we said, many non-Muslims might think Islam is totally separate from Judaism or Christianity and would be surprised.
Oh, definitely. And what's really fascinating is how the Quran gives these glimpses into the lives of so many prophets and other key figures. Many are very familiar from Jewish and Christian traditions.
Such as?
Well, you'll find discussions of Adam and Eve, the story of Satan, Noah and his ark, Abraham and his sons, including the sacrifice story, Joseph and his brothers, Lot with Sodom and Gomorrah, including discussions around same-gender relations, Moses and the children of Israel, and significantly, Christ Jesus, covering the crucifixion and the virgin birth of Mary.
Wait, the crucifixion too? I thought the perspective there was different.
It is different, and that's a key point. While the figures are shared, the Quranic perspective isn't always identical. It affirms Christ's virgin birth and his status as a major prophet, yes, but it explicitly denies his divinity and also denies that he was actually crucified. It presents a different account of his departure from the world.
So the stories are there, but sometimes with a distinct theological lens.
Exactly. It's like seeing these figures as part of one continuous story of God's message, but maybe with specific clarifications or emphasis from the Islamic perspective.
So the shared stories are there, revered personalities definitely, but maybe highlighting different lessons.
Or maybe fitting into the Quran-specific worldview.
Precisely, they serve the larger unified message of monotheism while being presented through that Quranic lens. And it's not only prophets, right? You mentioned other figures appear too.
Correct, yeah. Beyond the prophets, you find important figures like Mary, the mother of Christ. She actually has an entire chapter named after her, which is quite an honor, chapter Maryam. And there's Luqman the Wise. Another chapter derives lessons from him. The Quran also talks about various tribes, different incidents in human history, mainly Middle Eastern-centric, but there are these odd moments where its scope seems to broaden out. So it really is much wider than just prophetic stories. Which brings us to, I guess, the practical side. Beyond these narratives, what does the Quran say about just living day to day?
Yeah, and that's vital. The Quran is far from being just a collection of historical accounts or theology. It contains really crucial, very practical ethical messages, a kind of code for conduct.
Like what sort of things?
Well, it goes into detail about the importance of how you treat your parents, whether they're easy to get along with or difficult, how to nurture relationships with your family, your neighbors, how to care for the poor, the orphan, the needy. It's a very comprehensive guide to fostering compassion and social responsibility.
And does it touch on bigger societal structures too, not just individual ethics?
Oh, absolutely. It includes detailed discussions on setting up charitable systems. Zakat is a key one, a form of obligatory charity, and it even outlines principles for developing an economic framework that's actually designed, in theory, to eliminate poverty entirely from society.
Eliminate poverty. That's a bold vision.
It really paints a picture of an ideal, just community.
So putting this all together, history, theology, ethics, spirituality, it sounds incredibly holistic.
It really is. The Holy Qur'an weaves all these threads together. When you look inside, it's clear it's not just a storybook of human history. It's more like a guide.
Exactly. A guide, a source book from which every Muslim is sort of expected to
draw lessons and apply them in their own life. That's a powerful idea. But let's be real. How do Muslims actually engage with this text day to day? Is everyone studying it deeply?
That's a great practical question, and the reality is there's huge diversity in how Muslims interact with the Quran. It's definitely not uniform. Some, perhaps sadly, might not read it much at all. Others might bring it out mainly for specific occasions, like weddings or funerals, seeing it maybe more as a blessed object for those moments.
A symbolic presence?
Sort of. And then, of course, you have people who dedicate immense effort to memorizing the entire book.
Cover to cover, Hafiz, memorizing the whole thing. That's incredible dedication. But is memorization the main goal, according to the text itself?
Well, this leads to a core message within the Quran about how to engage with it. The emphasis is that the real reward, the true benefit, doesn't just come from rote memorization.
Or just having it on the shelf.
Exactly. It comes fundamentally from reflection, contemplation.
Reflection. Can you expand on that?
There's a really vivid analogy used in the source material we looked at from Dr. Nakshawani. He says, essentially, don't be like donkeys that carry luggage.
Wow.
Try and reflect on the book that's sacred for you. It powerfully illustrates that just carrying the knowledge, just having memorized the words, isn't the point. It's about understanding the weight, the meaning.
Precisely. True engagement comes from wrestling with the meaning, letting its wisdom resonate, maybe reshape how you think and act. It's about that deep contemplation, not just recitation or memorization alone.
Don't be like donkeys that carry luggage. What a striking image that really lands. It captures that idea powerfully. Understanding comes from active thought, really grappling with the text, not just passively receiving it.
Exactly. So today we've really tried to peel back some layers on the Quran. We've looked at its unique structure, that non-chronological thematic approach,
Unwavering focus on monotheism.
and the surprising shared narratives it has with other Abrahamic faiths, even with its own distinct perspective.
And crucially, its comprehensive guidance, ethical, spiritual, societal.
It's clearly such a complex, multifaceted text shaping so many lives. Understanding its distinct nature, and especially that call for reflection, seems absolutely key.
It really is key to appreciating its huge ongoing impact.
Which leaves us with a thought, maybe for you listening. What might we learn about ourselves, about the world, when we genuinely try to understand these sacred texts that shape billions of lives, even when, or maybe especially when, they challenge our own ideas about what a holy book should look like, or how we're meant to engage with it?